Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Conscious Mind. I'm your host, Anthony Agati, along with my paranormal, non-believer, sort of believer, skeptical co-host, Nina Manfrey. Say hello, Nina.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that awesome introduction.
Another Saturday night with our paranormal friends talking about the things you want to hear, or maybe you don't want to hear. In any case, you clicked on the link, so you're stuck with us tonight. This show is broadcasted live every Saturday night right here on Facebook, just for you. Make comments below, hit the like button, and show us who's listening. You know you can ask questions too. We will answer them as we see them. Scroll in the comments section, so don't be shy. Okay, so Nina, what are we talking about tonight? What's the show about?
We're talking about the fake paranormal news or things that have happened on shows that are not the truth.
Or so they seem. So, okay, that's right. It's all about the so-called reality paranormal shows, both currently on TV right now and those who sort of met their untimely death, or I guess timely death. But we're not going to talk about the shows and their hosts like a 12-year-old girl fawning over the new Justin Bieber album. No. It's actually going to get a little dirtier than that, with some insight to the show's so-called reality genre, as well as some controversies and scandals, as Nina mentioned, that crept into your living room right off the television screen. We're certainly not going to hold back on opinions, good or bad, and we will dish the dirt. We're going to spill the tea, and we're going to blow the sprinkles off the cupcake from one of your favorite shows, like Psychic Kids, Paranormal State, Ghost Hunters, dare I say, Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted, and even the newest zombie to walk on the earth, The Low Files. So let's get right into it. Nina, which show do you want to talk about first?
Why don't we start with the most known, I guess, would be Ghost Hunters.
Ghost Hunters. So this was one of the first shows that I actually started to get into. I know Most Haunted came before, I believe, came before Ghost Hunters, but Ghost Hunters was sort of the introduction to the reality television of the paranormal world. It became popular, not as popular and not as mainstream as Ghost Adventures did, but Ghost Hunters, I guess, pulled me in. Nina, you weren't a fan of the show in the very beginning, or you weren't really a fan of paranormal or any kind of mysterious shows like this in the beginning. But when did you start to watch Ghost Adventures, or I'm sorry, Ghost Hunters, and
I,
get involved?
Ghost Hunters, gosh, when did I start watching that? I think it started to come around like 2002 was the first year it started, I think, right?
2004.
2004. I'm going to say maybe, what year are we in?
2017.
Probably like 6 or 7 years ago I started watching it, to be honest.
Yeah, well, actually, I think it was longer than that because you and I went to an event in 2010, I think.
You're correct.
Right, so it was over 7 years ago then.
Yeah, you got maybe 9 to 10 years.
Okay, so not too long after it started, really. But for those of you who've been living under a rock, Ghost Hunters, whose hosts were Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson. This show ran for 12 seasons. It started, as we just mentioned, in 2004 and ended last year. But along the way, there have been a lot of different, I guess, news and folks who have left the show and sort of badmouthed it afterwards. In addition to a couple of, well, I should say more than a couple of controversial instances that happened on the show itself. as I mentioned before, it was pretty much the one show that you can consider to be a pioneer show or pioneer reality paranormal show. Um, but going back years ago, and I'm talking about 2010, probably, or 2009. There was in the original show, or the original series of the show, in the first few episodes, or not episodes, seasons. Sorry, I can't talk tonight. Um, there was a woman who was the case worker or the case manager, Donna LaCroix. Do you remember her, Nina?
I do remember her, yes.
Well, th- she was basically the one that you would see on the show talking to a lot of the homeowners or owners of any of the locations that they went to prior to the ghost hunters or the TAPS team would go out and investigate for. And so she would get the cases, talk to Jason and Grant, and I guess determine whether or not they wanted to check it out and investigate. And so she started out with them, along with Brian Harnoy and Steve Gonzalez, I think, was there in the very beginning as well, and a couple of other people. But Donna LaCroix was the original case manager, and she left, I think it was in 2008 or 2009. But in 2010, she began to badmouth the show. Nina, do you remember hearing about any of this?
I do. I remember her. She did an interview, I believe, saying that they really weren't what you believed that they were, and they didn't have the best interests of the team or the people at heart.
Right, they were only after themselves, basically.
Correct, right.
And Donna had mentioned I think it was on Ghost Divas podcast show at the time, she had mentioned that she was going broke during the show. I'm not sure how or why that was even possible, but apparently she wasn't getting paid a lot from the production company or from the channel itself, Sci-Fi, and she became broke. She had no money, so she had to leave and quit the job to get a real job and make money off of it. But many people had said that afterwards, especially after this Ghost Divas interview back in 2010, that she was a disgruntled employee that just began to badmouth the host. And I mean, it's natural for people to do that. I've done that many times. I'm sure you guys out there have done that too. And so, was it a disgruntled employee in Donna LaCroix to badmouth and say things? She even alluded to the fact that if there was staging on the show, that she wasn't told about it. But my question is, why would she even bring that point up if it wasn't meant anything? And she went on, I think it was on Twitter after this interview, or somewhere online, some social media online, to state that that's not what she meant. She didn't mean, or wasn't alluding to the fact that Ghost Hunters was staging anything. She was just saying that if they were, that she wouldn't be told that because of the passion and the conviction that she had in the field, that she would never tolerate it. So therefore, if it was happening, she wasn't notified about it. Do I call bullshit on that? Do you call bullshit on that, Nina?
I call bullshit on. Well, you know what? You got to call bullshit on the whole thing, because if you're really, so into doing this whole ghost thing and you believed in it so passionately and that was your world, and then you wouldn't have waited till afterwards talking smack about, oh, there could be staging, oh, they were only out for themselves, oh, this, that, and the other. You would have done that from day one, and you would have jumped.
True, and then I guess the question is, how much passion can you have in you to break that and come forward and weigh the option of not having any more income? I'm sure there are many people that are out there that are in a job right now where, their bosses have done shit that are illegal, or that the company has done things that are illegal, that they're not saying anything because if they do, they're going to be gone. They have no job. But, if they were to leave, get fired, laid off, quit, whatever, they would come out and spill the beans on their company or their boss or their coworkers. So you sort of have to sort of weigh it a little bit to see truly if it is just a disgruntled employee, lashing out and making, all this stuff up, or is it because, you know, she doesn't have that job anymore and so not relying on that money, therefore she can, open up the floodgates and start to talk about the real thing.
I guess, but if you're that invested in the whole science behind everything, somebody not doing the right thing and faking or staging or doing things that they shouldn't be doing, you would think that you'd step up. If you believe that much in it, I don't believe you would have stayed that long. And if it was costing you money and they weren't paying you enough anyway, what was the big deal?
Right. That's the one thing that got me hung up was, if she said that she was losing money out of this whole deal, then, first of all, why stay, number one? Unless you were just out for fame for yourself and thinking that you were going to become this big star,
Right.
and, riding the coattails of Jason and Grant. But, I mean, this is kind of old news. It's, we're going back almost 10 years ago. I'm sure people don't even give a crap anymore about it. But I think it repeats itself, and it actually repeats itself. It repeated itself sort of again later on, not too long ago, with Chris Williams, Amy Bruni, and Adam Barry, who left the show sort of on the same terms, or the same afflictions were put upon them. At the time of their departure from Ghost Hunters, they left because they didn't negotiate their contracts well enough to stay on the show. But two, they also then said that they didn't have the backing of Jason Hawes, who has leverage because he is the host of the show, to help facilitate Pilgrim Films to sort of, he could have walked into the office of Pilgrim Films and said, listen, I love Chris Williams, I love Amy Bruni and Adam Barry, I think they're great, they're vital to this show, do something to make them happy, compromise or something or whatever. But apparently he never did that. And Amy Bruni and Chris Williams had went out on social media afterwards, and again, they badmouthed Jason and almost the entire crew, saying that they're only out for themselves. The same thing that Donald LaCroix had said about 6 or 7 years earlier. So it sort of repeats itself, and then you have to think now, okay, well, now you've got more, quote-unquote, employees leaving this company, quote-unquote, feeling almost the same way. So then you say to yourself, well, is this the same thing? Is it the same issue? And could it be true then?
But it's not the same thing because Donna alluded to staging. So she clearly knew something was going on. Wasn't privy to it, obviously, but knew something maybe was up. But when Amy and Adam left, they never said anything about that. Yes, they said that Jason was in for himself and the people on the team were and blah, blah, blah. And, they thought they had a good entertainment lawyer or whatever they call them, agent.
Their manager, yeah.
And right, and apparently, they didn't have that good a person to negotiate a deal for them like they did for Jason and the other members. But they never alluded to anything that was shady. The only shady thing was just the human being itself.
Well, there's a lot of suspicious things that had come out. We've talked about Donald LaCroix. We've talked about Amy, Chris, and Adam, who left as well, under sort of the same circumstances. And then you have the issue with the jacket pulling instance that happened live with Grant Wilson. And he then, subsequently after that incident, left the show as well. He had been alluding, I can't remember if it was prior to that incident that happened, the jacket pulling incident, or if it was afterwards, that he was talking about going back to his family and how hard it was being on the road all the time to do the show and wanted a normal life, and so that's the reason why he left. But it just leaves you with suspicion, all of these points, and then the sort of culmination of it all was this jacket pulling incident, which I remember watching and I remember seeing. And I didn't know what to believe at that point. I thought it was paranormal. But then researching afterwards and watching, there were tons of people. There's still videos out there that are being made. Do you know, Nina, that there's somebody that actually created a CGI video recreating Grant and the jacket, and simultaneously put this CGI figure next to the real live video of the show, and we're showing how sort of scientifically the jacket was not pulled across, it was pulled down, and therefore
Right.
that could be the fishing line wire or whatever it was that was in the coat, and he had his hand sort of clutched to his side and all this. People were going crazy with this and trying to not so much debunk them, but I guess trying to figure out, and this is where it led to. Um, what do you think about that whole jacket pulling incident?
I remember watching that as well, and the minute I saw it, I was like, that looks so fake. It was just the way it happened and
Well, you
his
debunk
movement.
everything right off the bat.
Yeah, no, but true, but it looked really bad. It wasn't even like, well, I gotta take a second look at that. It was like, no, that is the fakest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Well, wait.
What is going on?
Well, wait. What was the fake part of it? Was it the actual pulling of the jacket, or was it Grant's motioning and his reflex moving backwards?
It wasn't the pulling down of the jacket, it was his motions.
Right.
That is what I was like, what is he doing? He just faked that on live TV. You idiot. They can't edit you. We've just seen you.
Well,
That is what got me.
the video that I was talking about, if anybody is interested, they can go on YouTube. There is a YouTuber called Former GH Fan, and you can check out his CGI video. It's almost compelling a bit, just how we compare the two, but and how he sort of recreates it, and he can move the camera at all angles to see how this happened, to investigate. But and he purported that the jacket was being pulled down, and so if you were supposedly in this position where a spirit was pulling your hood of your jacket behind you, it would pull it horizontally and not pull it downward. But I don't know if you can argue that point, because maybe it was a shorter ghost, and they pulled from upwards and pulled it down. So you can't really give a definitive answer as to what is exactly real and what is fake in that manner. But Grant got a lot of slack for that, and he is still getting a lot of slack for that, and
that he should.
And he should. Now, he supposedly left the show afterwards because he wanted to get out of the paranormal field. It was taking him away from his family. But in the last few years, he has got back onto that circuit, the paranormal circuit, and has gone to conferences and conventions and con-cons and all of these things paranormally, to talk and get money. So he left to start this computer software gaming company or something like that, which didn't pan out right. I guess. And so he's trying to figure out a way to make some income. And the only way to do it, and the only thing that he knew how to do and what was more popular for him, was this paranormal ghost hunting thing. So I don't know. I don't believe that whole incident. I don't believe that was paranormal in nature, the jacket pulling thing. I feel as though that there was some sort of mechanism, because at that time, that's when Ghost Adventure was sort of becoming its peak.
They're picking up speed.
Exactly. And they needed something to pull them over. There's and it wasn't just that there are other episodes that Ghost Hunters had that sort of raised some eyebrows for a lot of people. And one of which, and I can't remember the location, but one of which I remember was the whole lamp pulling thing. Do you remember anything about that, Nina?
The lamp pulling thing. Is that the one where we were in a hotel or something?
I don't remember if it was a hotel, but I know where they were at was some sort of, I think it was a bedroom or something.
Yeah, I think it was there. We were in a hotel. I don't remember which one, but I do remember that now. Yeah.
And there's this sort of round table next to a chair that Grant was sitting in. Again, it's Grant.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Jason was sitting on the bed. And if you want, you can look this up. If you just type in Ghost Hunters lamp pulling on YouTube, I'm sure you'll be able to find the video. But originally, when they did the walkthrough of this place, the table had a lace tablecloth. It actually had a lace tablecloth and then a doily on top. And then the lamp was on top of that little doily, and then there was a picture frame that was sort of leaning on the table to the back wall. And I don't think it had a picture. I think it had some sort of history connotation to it or notation of some sort. But in the video that aired on this episode, you see Grant sitting in this chair next to the table. And over the course of 4 minute span, this lamp moves backwards, and it moves in the direction of where the actual cord is that's hanging off of the table. And if you look at this episode, in one part where they are in this room, the cord of the lamp is underneath the picture frame that is leaning against the wall that's sitting on the table. And then in another part where they show them still in that same room, the lamp cord is out from under the frame, and that's when the actual lamp is moving backwards over the course of 4 minutes. But also, too, in addition to that, if you look at this video very closely, you'll notice that the lace tablecloth is no longer a lace tablecloth. It's now a solid tablecloth. Because if you were to pull something on a lace tablecloth, the tablecloth would bunch up.
Right.
It would wrinkle up. If you had a smooth tablecloth and then you had this lamp sitting on top of it and pulled it by its cord, you can easily slide it across this table, or pull it with the tablecloth and it not bunch up, but the tablecloth would actually move along with the lamp itself. And you'll notice that that is what this is. There is no lace tablecloth. There's none of this. The cord is moved over at another point when this lamp is supposedly moving. So is that bullshit? Is that staged?
Of course it's staged. How could you not say it was staged? Listen, when you do these TV shows and these reality TV shows, especially these ghost shows, they need something to happen. And either you're going to stay true to yourself and true to your craft and not do anything and do the right thing and potentially have a boring show, or you're going to make it exciting so you can go on for season after season after season after season and rake in the dough and rake in the events that you go to that you get paid for. So I'm thinking that clearly it was staged, and those are the reasons why they did it.
Yeah, I mean, it's too coincidental. It's too suspicious for me. There's other pieces also too that I think it was an Eastern State Penitentiary, one of their episodes, where there is this black mass that they claim is a shadow figure running down one of the cell blocks. And I remember seeing a video a while ago that shows feet underneath this black mass. And so they had claimed that, or the people who were trying to debunk this, claiming that something or someone had some sort of black covering over them, but didn't fully cover their body, and you could see actual feet as it came closer towards the camera and then went away or ran back. This is coming from the same show that the famous line "Dude, Run" from Brian Harnoy came from. This is, I mean, you're a ghost hunter or you're an investigator, and you scream and you run. It's all suspicious to me. I'm not claiming to say that it is definitively a fake and fraud or stage show. I just think that there are too many pieces of evidence that lead in that direction. It's the only direction that I can go into. And I agree with you, Nina. It has to be In order to keep the money coming in and in order to keep the ratings up, you have to create, whether that is of the knowledge of the hosts and the participants of the show, or if it's not, and that's just strictly on the producers and directors and the channel side, you have to wonder that if you are a Jason or you are a Grant or anyone else on that show, that if you were to watch it and stand back objectively and see it the way that we do, you would see it and you would question the producers and the folks who are creating the show. And so, you should have had the morals enough to then stand up at that point and leave. Otherwise, it becomes the host's issue, and the host is the one that's actually creating it, and the blame solely is on them.
Well, I think you're absolutely right.
All right, I think we talked about Ghost Hunters enough. We can talk about all of these shows in depth, but I figured we'd get into a whole bunch of different ones. I've got, I think, 7 shows that I want to try and see if we can get into and talk about. If not, we just touch upon them, and you guys can go out there and research a little bit further. Nina, where else do you want to go?
Let's just do Ghost Adventures and get them out of the way too.
And get those idiots out of the way. All right. So, for those of you who are fawning and drooling over, obviously you know this show, Ghost Adventures. Zach, Nick, and Aaron. They've been on the air for 14 seasons, from 2008 to the present. They are, as I mentioned earlier, they are credited with actually bringing the paranormal to the mainstream. I do give them that. I give them that credit that they were the ones who bring the idea of investigating the paranormal and bringing the interest to the paranormal more to the mainstream than Ghost Hunters did. Because I think many of the Ghost Hunters fans were a lot older in age than the Ghost Adventures crew. And so, when
Are you calling it old?
yeah, we're old. Um, and especially at the time when they first started, because they were older, that they attracted more of the older crowd in the audience. So when you had Zach, Nick, and Aaron come forward, you get the teeny boppers, you get the young folks, who then in turn, start to talk about these things on social media. Many of the people for Ghost Hunters weren't in that genre where they could, relate and speak and broadcast their opinions and feelings on social media. And so I think that's the one reason why, too, that Ghost Adventures spread so quickly like a wildfire, was because of the young kids and the millennials who were, turning to social media to, post the video or talk about it, or make YouTube videos about those their shows and their episodes and everything. And so that is what sparked the sort of hype about Ghost Adventures from the start. So I give them the credit for that, but that's all that I give them credit for, because honestly, I have personal knowledge and I've had personal experiences with them, and I'm not saying that all of them are horrible, but for the most part, I think what you watch on television, well, I can say this, not that I think, but I can say it with the definitive assurance that what you see on television is not the reality of how they are. Don't
talk badly about my Aaron, though. I like him.
I like him too. I think he's like a puppy dog, just following Zach around, scooping up the poop for himself. And honestly, I don't think he has a backbone. He's a great guy. He's a nice guy, pleasant. Has a much better personality than Zach, obviously. But I think he's just riding out the wave on this thing, and I don't know. He's a much better person than this, and I don't understand why he's still there. I applaud Nick for leaving the show, and one of the interesting things. Well, before I get into that, Nina, what is your opinion about the show?
I was never always the the biggest fan of the show, whatever. I did start watching it on and off. I always thought it was very, like, Nick trying to be this sexy, like, oh, look at me, strong man. And, then you have Nick, like the smart guy, I'm going to make sure that we catch this all on film and look at me editing. And then, of course, you have Aaron, who I think I can relate to, who likes to run like I do. Although he did man up at the towards towards the end of the, well, towards the later years. But I think that they created these characters, and it wasn't, for me, it didn't feel real like Ghost Hunters felt.
Well, the one thing that I liked about Ghost Hunters was that the show, or what they portrayed the show to be, was not about the investigators. It was about the investigation. It was about where they were going and what they were doing to try and collect evidence or communicate or help the homeowner, whatever it was. I got that from Ghost Hunters. What I get from Ghost Adventures is more, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's all about me. I don't care about these ghosts. It's all about me. And that's what Zach portrays.
Right. They all played these characters. Absolutely. Right. That's what I mean.
Right. And I had the pleasure of interviewing Nick Groff a couple of years ago on my previous radio show, and talking to him about his embarkment on producing stuff for the Destination America channel, which is it was prior to the Shepherdstown show. It was prior to Paranormal Lockdown. It was prior to Ghost Asylum. And so we interviewed him, and he wasn't coming forward with all of these projects that he was going to get into because he didn't. It wasn't known, basically. It wasn't popular at that time. I'm sorry, it wasn't, not that it wasn't popular. It wasn't airing at that time, and so he could not contractually talk about it. And so I got a chance to talk to him before that, and this was around the time that his departure from Ghost Adventures started to sort of dwindle down a little bit, the hype of it all. And I remember when I interviewed him, he had, I can't remember what the question was, but he had alluded to the fact that he wasn't into the whole antagonizing thing anymore, that he changed his perception and he got clearer, and he got clarification, and was more, the feeling of being more subdued while investigating was more appealing, and that's what he wanted to bring forward. And so it was the alluding to the effect that his personality was clashing with Zach's. And I think from that interview that I did, I got that he left on his own because he just couldn't work with Zach anymore, and the idea that it was sort of this brutal force of investigators walking in, that's not what was appealing to Nick. And so I got that from that interview that I did with him. But overall, I think all three of them, set out to create this phenomenon based on their original documentary that then became Ghost Adventures. Do you remember watching that first? It wasn't the first episode. It was actually what they were the Travel Channel was considering this just to be a one-off thing, and it was a documentary that they went to the Gold Coast Hotel in Nevada, and this was that whole brick flying episode or show.
Yes, I saw that.
Mm-hmm. Did you know that there was claims of fraud in that piece?
At the time, I thought, wow, something really did happen. And then later on, I just saw all of these things, like people debunking it, people pulling up film from when they had interviewed that woman, and look at the way the room looked then, and then when you went back that night, look at how the brick was standing there where it wasn't before. So at the time, I was like, wow, something really did happen, I thought, but then, afterwards, reality hit me.
Well, there's another person, again, on my previous radio show that I interviewed was Michael J. Baker, and he's the founder of Para Boston. He's more like you, Nina. He is a skeptic at heart, and he he has a healthy skepticism about things, and there are some things that are in the paranormal world that he can't explain, and is not saying definitively that it's paranormal. But there are many things that he and his crew have come forward with as far as debunking. Even the equipment and the tools that people use, that we use in the field, the shows itself and the investigations, some of the claims that people state are the reasons why ghosts appear and all that other stuff. And so he has set out to not so much debunk, but investigate them. And if debunking comes from it, that's the end result for his team. And so he's got a website, Paraboston. I think it's called paraboston.com. But there was an article on there that was done in 2014 that I wanted to read. Do you mind if I read it, Nina?
No, go ahead.
So it's an article that was written by Josh Weinstein. And it's titled "One Little Brick Started It All." And it's talking about this documentary, The Ghost Adventures. But what's interesting about this article is that he, Josh Weinstein, went to Nevada, went to the Gold Coast Hotel to do a documentary for himself. He was a filmmaker, or is a filmmaker. And so were Zach and Nick at that time. They were just documentarians. They were filmmakers. And I'm talking about years ago, 2004, 2005. This was their passion. That's what they wanted to do, was make films. They never really thought about the idea of doing any kind of paranormal reality thing. But so they met at a convention, actually. And this guy, Josh Weinstein, met Zach and Nick and talked to them about the filmmaking industry. And at this convention, Zach was selling some equipment pieces or something of that nature, whatever. And that was it for their introduction. And then a few years later, this guy, Josh Weinstein, realized that after seeing the whole documentary, that these were those same guys that he met years ago in the convention. But before this show aired, or right before the show aired, because it was a film that was created, I think it was a year or two before it was put on air. Zach and them were trying to market this film to put on any channel that they could so that they can get airtime and make money off of it. So it took a couple of years before anybody saw this in the public. And so during that time, this guy, Josh Weinstein, was actually in Nevada trying to talk about something, about the gold mining era. And so he was trying to create a film about gold mining. And while doing this, he actually tripped and came across some things that revealed some interesting facts. And so I wanted to read this article about it. And this talks about some of the fraud that you may not be aware of. So it goes like this. As an independent filmmaker, I was in Las Vegas, Nevada for a filmmakers convention in the early 2000s. Like many of us who were networking to find jobs within the entertainment or documentary industry, I wanted to present the best case for my former company as I could, during which time we partied with others who were shopping their wares and with producers for networks. And this is when I first met three guys who later became larger than life in the genre of television that was about to take off. I was walking through the convention hall and still remember to this day of these guys having a large sign saying, "We'll make any film for money." I found it rather amusing, three college-age guys who were ready to sell their souls to make a film, but kind of wish I had thought that myself. About 2 years later, I was skimming through the channels and came across a commercial for a new ghost hunting documentary called Ghost Adventures on Sci-Fi Channel. And when I saw who was going to be in it, I immediately recognized that the trio from the convention and their signs selling their wares. At that moment, I set my VCR to record it, since I was going to be in Vancouver for another project. And to my surprise, after watching it, I was amazed what they went through. By the beginning of 2005, I was assigned to begin a documentary on gold mining and the Old West towns that began, lived, and died from the gold mining boom of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. I spent weeks traveling the back roads of the American West, staying in cheap motels, eating in hole-in-the-wall diners. I would meet with historians, miners, and their families, and townspeople who remained in these towns. It was on one long drive I made through the Nevada desert when I came upon the town of Goldfield. If you have ever visited Goldfield, it's in the middle of nowhere. It contains probably the world's largest junkyard of decaying mobile homes, cars, and other rubbish. The streets are like the Old West, literally dirt, smelling of urine, spilled beer, and broken glass. As I drove through town, I saw in the distance a large brick structure, the Goldfield Hotel. Put onto the National Register of Historic Places in 1982, the Goldfield was far from the once luxurious hotel she once was. As I turned onto Crook Avenue, I remembered this was the place where the Ghost Adventures documentary was filmed. So I parked my rental car and, grabbing my camera, I strolled around the property taking photos. As I made my way back to the car, I was approached by a gentleman that resembled one of the actors who played in Hollywood's westerns of years gone by. We struck up a conversation, and after telling him what I was doing for our documentary for the film commission, he explained to me that he was the owner of the Goldfield. As we were talking, I could hear the disappointment in his voice, and later I found out the reason why. Asking me not to video or photo our conversation, he began to tell me what really happened at the Goldfield. He began to tell me of the troubles in getting the historic hotel reopened, the structural damage of the upper floors, lacking of heating and air conditioning, and deteriorating walls with peeling lead paint, to name a few. He tried to gather other investors to help from historic societies and the state of Nevada, to no avail, and then they came. About a year before the GA documentary appeared on Sci-Fi, 3 filmmakers came to Goldfield and approached Red. They came to film a documentary about haunted places, and after hearing of the tales behind the hauntings of the Goldfield, they offered to pay him $200 to film there. Never looking at a gift horse in the mouth, he took them up on their offer. They set up to begin filming. They interviewed the townspeople and interviewed him. They came back with hardware to install a padlock on the front door. This was used for filming. He later told me that even though, for filming purposes, that they were quote-unquote locked in the hotel, in actuality, the rear employee entrance was unlocked so they could go to their vehicle. He locked them in and went home. The next morning, he entered the rear of the hotel, where all 3 of the filmmakers were sitting around joking about their night. They left later that morning and went back to a nearby motel to sleep it off for a few hours. Red went through the property to make sure it was secure, and then he waited to see what was about to transpire. The documentary later aired, and much to his disbelief, saw something that was unnerving, a brick allegedly being quote-unquote thrown across the room. That sent up red flags, and never again, he thought, would allow such shenanigans be done in the hotel again. After the show ended, the next morning he went to the basement and searched for any bricks that would have sailed like the one in the documentary. After searching the basement room thoroughly, he came upon a brick with 2 holes drilled in at different angles. It looked as if it was battered, with gouge marks and chips, and that's what hit him, that this was the brick that was used in the documentary, and he was livid. Is this to say that it was used as a stunt? Was there fakery involved? You decide. For now, the brick resides on a workbench as a souvenir to a supposed paranormal event. He later explained that the attention has been a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that numerous paranormal events and numerous groups book events and investigations there, but the curse of having to fend off vandals and trespassers. I can actually understand his frustration about all of this unneeded attention. As we walked through the formal lap of luxury, the grandeur is long gone. Broken walls, decayed floors, blah, 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 blah. That's all that it says. So this guy interviewed Red, who is the owner of, or was the owner of Goldfield at the time, and he stated that after the first documentary of Ghost Adventures aired, he went down in the basement, found a brick with holes in it, which supposedly then could have been the brick that was used, or claimed to have been the brick that flew across by utilizing fishing line wire that went through those holes. I've always thought of that. There are many people who have done many different videos debunking this whole brick thing. Not only just the brick itself, but there's also pieces of wood that fall over as this brick is flying through the air, and the way that this piece of wood falls is, I guess, physically impossible for it to do it in the trajectory of the brick or whatever. So this is what this guy is saying. I've never believed this brick flying in the air. It's not that it's never happened again or anything of that nature has ever happened, but just watching the reactions was a little too overdramatic for me. And
What? That they wanted to run like the wind, start screaming like little girls?
but they did. They ran
I
out of that
know.
thing. It was. I mean, I guess you could say this is their first experience, and this was a documentary. They had never been in this before. So, just pick you, Nina, being in that room for the first time, and something like that happens. I'm sure you're not going to stand around. You're going to.
Well, if everybody else is running, I'm running too, just so you know.
But I don't know. I've always felt that, and I've watched many, many different videos on this that people have sort of, really critiqued and debunked that whole thing. And so, could they have embarked on this whole venture on a lie, on a fraud? There have been other videos or other episodes that have come forward also too, with the Ghost Adventures folks, that like the whole I don't know if it was the millimeter or something that flew out of this guy's hand, one of their guests that were on one of the shows. And it turns out that this guy actually was frauding the Ghost Adventures crew, the channel, as well as the audience, and he basically flung it out of his hand, which later the Ghost Adventures crew actually debunked themselves and called this guy a fraud.
I also read that they're very inaccurate at telling the backstories of some of the places that they've gone to as well.
That's right. And part of that has to do with, oh God, I forgot his name now.
Billy?
No, there's a researcher that you don't see, that I've met years ago. He's the researcher for Ghost Adventures, or was the researcher for the Ghost Adventures. He does, I think he writes blogs or a book called Legend Tripping. Damn it, his name is on the tip of my tongue. Well, in any case, the blame would be on this guy, who would do the research for the guys and give them the information. Because Zach and them are not actually online researching this stuff. They got people doing that for them. But is it Zach and them, when they recreate it or talk about it, change it so that it is more, I don't know, mysterious, demonic, or whatever in nature? I think so. I think it's bullshit.
Well, that's their whole deal. So
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Ghost Adventures. I was. I be honest with you, I was. Probably a year or two into watching them, I started to lose that that liking for them, and then just continued to watch the shows just to see what locations they went to. It was hard for me to believe a lot of the things that were coming from them. I wasn't a fan of their approach to investigating. They would walk in. Well, I would say he would walk in, Zach, like a bat out of hell, and just antagonize the shit out of anybody that was there. And if he wasn't getting an answer quickly, he got even more angrier, and taking off his shirt and demanding things. It became ridiculous. But I actually had the wonderfulness of actually investigating with them one-on-one when I was at Eastern State Penitentiary. And, in the beginning of their hype of Ghost Adventures, I went to many different conventions that they were at, and they were accommodating. They were pleasant and to talk to and to be with. And then it became where the hype was, they didn't need these conventions anymore. That's what the feeling that they were portraying. And actually, there was one time when I was at the Stanley Hotel in Colorado, where I did I went to a convention there and doing an investigation, and they were there as well. And during the night while we were investigating the hotel that we paid to be there for, and flew across the country to be there for, they left in the middle of it all, just walked out, and all of them just up and left, and didn't say anything. And so really pissed off a lot of people that were there, and that was the time when Mark and Debbie Constantino were there, and Mark and Debbie continued the investigation with us, which was actually cool because I got to actually know them more, because Zach wasn't, sort of taking over and absorbing all of the attention. So I kind of liked it that they left, but there were a lot of other people that were there that strictly came just to see them, and they left in the middle of it. That's kind of shitty. That's real shitty.
Well, those are people that are just out for themselves too, clearly.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about Ghost Avengers anymore. I hate them. Sorry, I'm just not a fan of them. I'm not. I can't even tell you when the last time I saw it.
Yeah, I haven't watched it in forever and a day either.
I wanted.
Go
ahead.
ahead. I wanted to say, go ahead. Pick the next poor soul that we're gonna crucify.
Well,
next poor show.
And this one is very deserving of torturing. I don't think you know much about this show, The Psychic Kids.
I did, to be honest. I watched like a couple episodes.
Oh, you did?
Way back when. I did a couple of episodes way back when. Yes, I did.
All right, so Psychic Kids, Chip Coffey.
Who I do not like, by the way, but go ahead.
I despise him. I think I actually despise him more than I do Zach from Ghost Adventures.
He's a creepy man.
Yes.
Didn't we meet him at that Ghost Adventure when we were in Cooperstown?
In Ghost Hunters Convention, yes, we did.
Yep. Okay.
He was a child in a man's body. That's when I found out, how his personality was. And I've had a personal interaction with him, actually a online fight with Chip Coffey. Do you remember that, Nina? Do you remember me telling you about that?
I remember you telling me about it, yes.
So Chip Coffey was the host of Psychic Kids. It's a show that ran for 3 seasons from 2008 to 2010, which sort of aired concurrently with Paranormal State, the other paranormal show that we're going to hopefully talk about tonight, where Chip sort of rode the coattails of Ryan Buell from Paranormal State. And the premise of the show was for Chip to meet with kids who, I guess, had the ability to speak and see spirits and the afterlife, but also to make them face their fears of this ability. Which in itself is almost child abuse in my eyes. One of the episodes, this was so ridiculous. One of the episodes, and I don't remember the name of it. It may have been called. No, it wasn't that one. I'm not sure what this one was called. But there was one episode where there was a qualified mental health professional, a psychologist, that had gone, I guess, with, or had been on several episodes, but it was sort of not a every episode cast member. This woman, Lisa Miller, Dr. Lisa Miller, if you want to call her by a professional name, if she is professional, went to many different houses during different episodes. And at this one particular one, the mother was saying to Dr. Lisa, and while the daughter was sitting there on the couch as well, young girl, she may have been like 13 or 14, stating how, she had these things, she was seeing shadow figures, and she was talking to, she had always been talking to invisible, quote unquote, invisible people ever since she was young. And her mother thought that there was something mentally wrong with her. And so she was saying to this doctor that she always tried to figure out where she could go to get her daughter help. There was no doctor that she could find that could help her. And if she did find somebody, all they would do was hook her up to electrodes and give her shock therapy and all this other stuff. And you see this woman, this quote unquote doctor, Lisa Miller, sitting on the couch next to the mother while she's saying this, nodding her head and saying, like they still do shock therapy for people in this day and age. and didn't correct the mother, didn't do anything else. And it was, again, to create the hype that, anybody who has an ability of like this or any kind of mental health issue, that you're put in a padded cell and shocked till your ears turn black. That pissed me off. I remember watching that episode, and that pissed me off. There's also the personality of Chip Coffey. He himself is very cold in nature. If you've ever watched Psychic Kids, or if you've ever watched Paranormal State when he's on there, he always walks through the home like first of all, like his shit doesn't stink, or that it's like it's almost he's being bothered to be there because of his abrupt one-word answers to people, or it's just the non-emotional feeling. Even in Psychic Kids, he was so non-emotional to the kids' feelings, and they're being hurt and they're being upset. He didn't give a shit about these kids. He wanted to throw them in a room and call upon demon spirits, which he actually did at one point. Call upon demon spirits to confront these kids with him, and hopefully that was supposed to help them get over their fear. Now, I don't know if anybody here has ever gone to a haunted location and been able to bring a 12, 10, 13-year-old into the place and investigate along with them. There is no location out there that allows anybody to go in there without the parent, number one, but also two, just the morality of it all. You don't bring little children into a haunted location because you don't know what can happen, and they don't have the ability at that point to understand anything as to what can happen. You as an adult are taking upon those consequences that happen. But this idiot, Chip Coffey, would throw them to the lion's den and make them fend for themselves, and that supposedly was supposed to get them over the fear. To me, that's basic torture, child torture. I don't know about you, Nina. What do you think?
Well, I only watched maybe 3 episodes of the series or whatever. Out of how many years he was on, I don't really remember. The ones that I watched, I sort of didn't get the same feeling that you're getting, and not that I'm defending the man at all, but the two shows that I watched, or the 3 shows, whatever, it was very little. I felt like he was trying to help the kids come to realize that this is a gift that they have and they shouldn't be afraid of it. You feel very strongly, clearly, that he was doing the wrong thing, but I think that the ones that I saw, he was trying to be like, you shouldn't be hiding, you shouldn't be afraid, you should embrace the gift that you have, type deal. Yeah. And I did like the fact that he had psychologists there to help the kids through anything that they were going through, but I certainly didn't watch the ones that you watched because I don't remember any of that.
I agree with you. The intention was correct. I think his mode of transport to get to that point was not in the best interest or the safety of the child. The way that you do that is you don't throw them in a room and call upon demon spirits, and then coach the child on what to do and what to say. It's putting them on the firing line, in my opinion. If he would have walked into the room and talked to them about his experiences and techniques that he used and all that, obviously that wouldn't make for a great show. This makes for a great show because you see emotions from the child. You see a child struggling, and this king walk in and try and save them. I don't know. Call me cynical. I don't know. This show should never have been put on the air. It should never have aired at all.
I mean, I get what you're saying because that's probably what drew a lot of people to watch that show, is seeing that broken thing in these poor kids or whatever. So I sort of understand what you're saying, and I sort of understand the whole child abuse aspect to it. But I do also see the side that he was trying to help these kids and not to be afraid of their gift, sort of. Well, no, that's what he tried to do. Absolutely, I think.
I, I have questions about his abilities. Number one, I've always had question about his abilities because I've seen many different interviews, and I've seen him not just on Paranormal State or Psychic Kids, but I've seen other videos of his gallery readings that just question his ability. And a couple of years
Well,
ago, go ahead.
well, it's funny because I was reading up on him as well, and there was something called Operation Bumblebee. Did you hear
Yes.
about that? Which I thought was unbelievable. How they set up this, like, it was like a sting, and they had people go into one of his readings, and they all were there, and they all had a story set up. It wasn't a legitimate story, but they all had their story of what they were going to um, portray if he picked on them. But as they were going throughout the the seminar, whatever you want to call the thing, they were talking out loud about, oh, I really want to talk to Chip about my 3-year-old daughter who died at blah blah blah, and like, and they wore distinctive clothing. So when Chip was on the stage, he knew who to pick out because he heard it from, well, probably not him necessarily, but I think it was his assistant that heard them talking about these certain scenarios. So now he had back knowledge of everything that was going on with these people. So when he picked them, he'd be like, "Oh, I sense that you hear about a 3-year-old child that has died," and they were like, "Oh, yes, that's true." So in reality, he knew nothing, could pick up nothing, and he was just getting it all from people talking around him.
Right. That was actually what I was going to bring up, and I knew about it, and I confronted Chip about it. A couple of years ago, when I was doing the other radio show, I interviewed the guy who was in charge of this Operation Bumblebee, Sheldon. Crikey, Sheldon Helms. Um, he is the gentleman who led this operation, and before the show aired that I was going to interview him on, I reached out to Chip Coffey to see if he wanted to come on my show and debate, this whole operation and the allegations that Sheldon was claiming that these were hot readings, which meant that Chip he had foreknowledge of the information, as you were mentioning, because prior to the gallery reading starting, all of the audience members were in a room together talking. And obviously, when you've got people in there who are wishing to hear from their loved ones, they're going to talk to other people to say why they're there, what their plight is, what are they looking for. And the assistants and people who worked for Chip would walk around this room and overhear conversations and even talk to some of the people, and then go back to Chip right after that, as the audience members would go into their seats, and tell him, who was saying what they were wearing, and possibly use that as a button to push when he would, supposedly talk about the dead, or bring up the dead and talk about family members. And so I asked him if he wanted to come on my show and talk about it. Not so much debate Sheldon Helms, Sheldon Helms, but to give his side of it. I wanted to be fair. And he responded back and said no, he has no time for nonsense. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he just basically said he has no time for this. So I had Sheldon Helms on the radio. We went through the whole operation. He described everything, talked about his opinions about things, talked about what happened in the sort of foyer before going into his seats, and who he talked to, and he was talking about how he wore a bright green shirt, and the woman that he was with was wearing I don't know if it was a bright pink shirt or something, so that they would stand out amongst the crowd, and just was what you were just talking about. And we did the show. talked to Sheldon. It was a great show talking about it. Some eye-opening things, I think, that many of the listeners that we had at that time didn't know. And there were some people who were, obviously bad-mouthing us, the show, because they loved Chip Coffey, and how dare we bring anything like this forward. But the funny thing is, 2 days after the show aired, Chip then emailed me back and must have listened to the show and said, I want to come on and get and set the record straight. And I said, stubborn me, I said no, sorry, you had your chance. We're moving on to another topic. Thank you. And that was it. But that just goes to show you that he was too afraid to confront the naysayers, the people who come against him. And I guess he thought, after hearing the show, coming on after, without having anybody, I should have actually called Sheldon Helms back and said, can you come back on the show and not tell Chip Coffey, and then see what that kind of content came out to be. But I didn't. But anyway, that just goes to show you that, he's afraid, and that, I don't know if it tells you that he's a bullshit artist, but to me it did. It just showed me what kind of a man that Chip Coffey is.
Well, clearly, see, this is why I'm so skeptical about things, because look at what happens. If you're legit or if you're not legit, then just be who you are. Doing things like this doesn't help anyone, and just makes such bad news for everyone.
And people have said the same thing about Teresa Caputo, the Long Island medium.
Oh yeah, I saw some videos about that. There's this guy, what the heck is his name? Hold on, I have it here. Dan something or other.
I just, when I first saw her show, and I'm sort of like you, Nina. I'm skeptical about psychics, and that's only
You're
because,
more skeptical about psychics than you are about going to a haunted location.
Yeah, because I don't. I guess because I've had bad experiences in the past that, maybe I just went to the wrong psychics. I don't know, but I've never been a big believer in it, and many people that I know, it's just anybody can get the same results who are not quote unquote labeled as a psychic in the same manner, because there are many people who question things. Although I have to say this, a friend of mine in work went to a psychic in New York City, in Manhattan, and she did not know him, and he certainly did not know her. And when she walked into the room, she told me the story. When she walked into the room where he was, it was on top of a bookstore in New York City. And this psychic, his thing is that everybody who walks into the room has to take off their shoes. For some reason, he believes that the shoes sort of hold back the energies. So this sort of releases the energies through your feet. I don't know if that makes sense. But anyway, when she sat down, the first thing he said to her was, your mother died, right? And her mother did die. Her mother died a few years before she went to go see him. How do you ask that question? This girl now is 29 years old, or 28 years old at the time. How can you look at a 28-year-old and say your mother died? Not many people can do that. I can see if you're talking to somebody who is in their 40s or 50s, obviously stating something like your mother died could be a sort of, not so much
50-50 chance.
Not even so much a 50-50 chance, but, I believe that they have a better chance. But to see somebody at 28 saying that, I don't know. I feel as though that this guy may have something, and I'm not stating
you seem very excited about this guy.
I actually, she was actually going to, when I had my old radio show, she was going to actually try and get him to come on, and it just never happened. But, I wanted to talk to him. I wanted to find out, because I can't find anybody that amazes me as someone who's a psychic. Did you ever find out who the guy was?
Yes, his name is Ron Tebow,
Oh, I heard
and
that name.
he had a
Skeptic
website
website, right?
called scifake.com,
Right, right.
but he's on YouTube, and he finds any and every way to debunk this Teresa, the Long Island medium.
Yeah.
He does not like her whatsoever. Oh, and I can understand the things that he points out, like, when she's doing these live readings, and she'll go up to somebody and be like, "Do you have a brother that died?" And then they were like, "No." She's like, "Well, somebody that died that was a male or a boy, or like, the way he was describing how she gets out of a situation when she's trying to find something out about the person, or find something in the person's past that she can bring up, and how she gets agitated if the person keeps saying, "No, that's not right, no, that's not right," and how she gets angry, sort of, and then goes and jumps to another person, or like talks over the person so you can't hear that the answer was no, you're not getting it right.
Yeah, it's
Was
what they call a cold reading. And a cold reading is basically the psychic is um, watching your body language and determining where to go next, or whether or not the answer that or the question that they're bringing forward is right or not before you even answer it. Because unbeknownst to anyone, your face and your body actually reacts before you verbally say anything. And many of the psychics that you see pick up on that. And so prior to you even saying anything, they can say, "Wait, no, I didn't mean that," if they get a notion from your body language that the answer that they just gave you is wrong. Or they can sort of see your body language in determining what question or what answer to give next. It's kind of weird. It's kind of funny. It's almost like a police investigation and a, what is it called, a serial, not not a forensic expert, somebody who can read body language or read faces or something like that or whatever. But it's almost that scientific that these psychics utilize in order to do these readings, and that's what she's doing. That's what Chip Coffey had done as well. He did that many times, but people are stating that that's what Teresa does as well.
Which I was a little upset, because I thought that she was the real deal. But I guess that's not the real person either.
What was that other guy, John?
Oh God.
I forgot his name now.
God, my friend Dory loved him to death.
He sort of fell off the face of the earth, and that's because
John Edwards.
John Edwards. And that's because he had the same scandal about hot readings, where his assistants would interview and talk to people beforehand, and then the information would be given to him, and he would do a gallery reading similar to what we were just talking about. There's also another one. There's a young kid right now on TV.
Tyler Henry.
Yes. And
I want to believe all of this is true.
Well, this is kind of bullshit to me. I don't even know how we're getting into all of these psychics, because we're going to talk about some of these paranormal shows. But let me just say this about this Tyler kid. There's one episode where he's talking to, oh my God, what's that girl group from the 90s? Left
The
Eye?
Spice Girls?
No, Left Eye.
Oh, dang it. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
Yes.
TLC.
So the one that died in what was it, the house fire or something?
Yes.
Left Eye, right?
Left Eye. Mm-hmm.
So she had died. This kid now, he's 20-something years old. He's a millennial. He may not know, but he's got to know this. So he was talking to one of the other members of TLC and giving her a reading, and he brings up, someone died. Something about the eye, left eye. Somebody died. Like he had no fucking clue who she. First of all, who he was reading. Number one,
Well,
Obviously, if you're interviewing and I mean you're reading a celebrity, you got to know what the group she was in, and
well,
you have to know.
apparently he doesn't know a lot of these people that he's going to do interviews with.
That's
Like he's
bullshit.
from the sticks and he doesn't know. He doesn't watch a lot of TV.
Bullshit.
See, I don't know. I watch him because I watched a couple episodes of that too. I dabble in everything. Um, and when he's giving some of the readings and he's like drawing those circles, whatever the heck he does on that pad that he does, like he's legit sweating. So and like saying stuff. And I know that there's celebrities and things are online, but he really, he says he doesn't know who he's going to see. But when he's doing those circles and talking, like he starts to sweat profusely for some of them. So what would make him sweat like that?
I don't know.
Like,
Chili,
what?
chili, hot peppers. I don't know.
Like, what do you do? Pop a hot pepper in his mouth before he started talking to these people?
Hey, why not?
I don't know. I see. I still want to believe that one of these psychics are like the real deal. I don't know why. I just root for it. I can't stand when people debunk them.
It's so funny how you will, put up the armor and get the machete out for psychics. But for a lot of this other paranormal stuff, you're like, that's bullshit. That's not real. So
I guess
funny.
I just want to believe that somebody can like talk to people out there and like or know what's going on in the future. Like I don't know. I just find something so I don't know. It's something I just want to be true. And it's always not the right thing. Can't stand it.
All right, let's get on to another paranormal, supposed paranormal show. I want to talk about Paranormal State because this one is a doozy.
God, this poor kid.
I think it is one of it's the cherry on top of this, luxurious cupcake of paranormal shows that are sort of fake and fraud in nature. But Paranormal State, obviously this is hosted by Ryan Buell. Started off from a group in Penn State College. It ran for 5 seasons from 2007 to 2011. And the premise of the show was basically these members of Penn State Paranormal would go to residential homes to help the family members, I guess, find out what it is, whether or not it is paranormal or not, and 2, to hopefully help them, move on these spirits or somehow cleanse the home or the location so that they can continue living in peace. What do you think about this show, Nina? I'll start off with you first.
I did watch the show as well. I don't know. I found it to be somewhat. I really didn't think it was fake, to be quite honest. I felt like, they were there, like they did these psychological tests on the people, and they set up. I don't know. It just to me didn't seem like anything that they found. Like there was never a flying brick in any of their episodes, and nothing that I was like, Jesus, this is so not real. So I want to. I mean, I don't always believe these things clearly, but I want to say that what they did, I guess they didn't do for pure, TV ratings.
Well, I mean, I'd have to disagree with you because they may not have had the flying bricks like others, or the dude run, but they did things overly dramatic. You know, even down to the way that Ryan Buell would talk and say, Captain's log. We're at whatever. It was just so over the top, and
But I think that
felt
he did
scripted.
that. Yeah, but I think he just did that because it was
It was a
something to
gimmick.
grab your attention. Yeah, right.
It was a gimmick. Yeah, I get it. I just, I guess for the time that it was, it was required, I guess. I don't know. I think if they were to start a show now, they probably would not do that if they were never on the air before. But there are a lot of things that you find out later on if you dig deeper into a lot of these shows that, again, whether or not it is on the part of the host and the investigators, or if it's on the part of the channel and the producers and the director that create this den of fraud, in any case, both are at fault. Because it was continued to be led and continued to be shown. So during my digging, and I again, I don't know if you listened to the previous show that I did, Nina. I interviewed Ryan Buell. This was at the time when he was claiming he had pancreatic cancer, which we all know now was false, and that he was lying. And he was basically lying to get money. But I had interviewed him many years ago, and he seemed like a legit guy. He seemed real. And this was before any of his issues arose, and many of the things that came forward. It was, though, after the I Am 6 episode. Do you know anything about all of that hoopla?
I do remember that, yes.
So, what do you know about that is questionable? Or do you know any of the details?
Wasn't that the demon that just kept following him around everywhere?
No, this was about a girl, not a little girl, it's a young girl, who claimed to be possessed. It was
I'm mistaken about them.
It was almost like an exorcism, like the movie The Exorcist. It was almost like that kind of case. It was titled I Am 6, and it was one of the shows that they did more than they did like a series of shows on this because they couldn't fit it all into one episode. But Kirby Robinson, who is a debunker, I guess you'd say, of the paranormal. He's got a blog website called Eye on the Paranormal, and I had interviewed him as well, and had an on-air argument with him. But he made it his mission to bury Ryan Buell and this whole show, Paranormal State, because he had insight. And many people didn't want to listen to Kirby Robinson at the time, but and he was the pioneer in actually finding a lot of the fraud that Paranormal State had put forward, and now sort of he's being recognized for it. But here's a bunch of things in regards to I Am 6, the episode, that actually was, people had said that is actually the start of the downfall of Paranormal State. And in this series of episodes for I Am 6, and they also had a subsequent show called I Am 6-2, which was a sort of return to the home and all this other crap on it. But I Am 6, we found out because of the smart people out there online that really look at these episodes and look at the clocks that are on the walls or on the DVD players that are in the back in the homes while the show is being aired, and putting these things together, and it just is not clicking right. So we pretty much found out, and their famous line or portion of their episode was dead time, and dead time they claimed was always at 3 a.m. because
right.
It's the opposite of the Jesus birth, I think, or crucifixion, whatever it is. But dead time was never at 3 a.m. in reality. It was always done between 11:30 and 1:30. That's whenever they recorded these things. I just wrote out a bunch of different bullet points that I can read, and if you want to jump in, Nina, you can, and sort of elaborate a bit if you know anything about it. But many people who called in the team claimed that much of the information about the case was provided to the producers ahead of time, and it was actually, here we go again, given to Chip Coffey before his arrival. There are many instances from witnesses, from people who worked on the show, that said that the information from this episode, I Am Six, before they came to investigate this girl, much of the information was provided to Ryan Buell and the team, as well as Chip Coffey. You know how Chip Coffey says that he walks into these homes and doesn't know anything? He's given the information beforehand. He knows about the information in the details before he walks into that door. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, huh?
Many of the incidents that happened were staged according to the clients, like shadow people were acted out by crew members to show what they saw but were claimed to be the real video. Most famous case was I Am Six, a demonic possession of a girl. As I mentioned, Kirby Robinson was the person who repeatedly brought out all of the scams of the show. Ryan talks about holy ground when he first addresses the team. Ryan should know that demons, as well as their leadership, have access to all holy places, so just being in a church doesn't prevent you from being attacked by a demonic spirit. When Laura, this is the name of the girl that was supposedly possessed, and they show the actual exorcism on this episode. When Laura greets the team, she doesn't show any signs of discomfort or pain. She seems to be very happy to be on camera. I don't know about that comment. Many people who are possessed have sort of these many polar personalities. Notice that there are religious symbols throughout the house, and her mom is even wearing crosses as earrings, yet Lara shows no discomfort towards those objects. The pentagram has nothing to do with demons. This is somebody who was sort of critiquing this episode and pulling out these supposed facts. The pentagram has nothing to do with demons. Why were no religious items placed in or under Lara's bed to see if any discomfort took place? Father Andrew Calder does a walkthrough, but no in-depth interview with Lara. That was kind of strange. The priest that was brought in never sat down with Lara to talk to her. It was always with Ryan and always walking through the home. That you never see him talking to Lara at all until the exorcism itself. When Lorraine Warren, who everybody knows, Lorraine Warren, is talking to Ryan on the phone, she says something not true about the Legion story from the Bible. Legion was not the name of the demon. The demon was simply saying that Legion, defined as many, means that many demons were in this person. Ryan violates one of his own church's rules when it comes to determining if an exorcism is even required. It states that all mental illnesses must be ruled out. The psychologist says that it is possible that Lara has a dissociative disorder. And so many people say that even before an exorcism is done, you should go through all mental illness tests to see whether or not that is true before doing any kind of religious ritual. Father Calder should have gone through a time of biblical fasting to prepare himself for the exorcism, which they claim he never did. The state of grace that Ryan talks about is not something that is quickly or easily done in just a few minutes, nor is it something you can do with a few lighted candles, but it takes an in-depth soul-searching prayer and complete confession of all sins that have to take place within your life. Each and every person in the house, including Laura's family and the entire cast and crew, would be required to do the same. So they're talking about the exorcism itself, that there's a process involved that none of which happened at all.
Right.
Laura's family should not have been allowed in the room. Father Calder does not have any assistance in the exorcism. He did it alone. Chip should have not have interrupted the exorcism. He did at one point interrupted the exorcism. He interjected himself into it, which he should not have done according to religious standards during an exorcism. Lara shows no spiritual knowledge of past or future events relating to anyone, especially Father Calder. There is no vulgarity, spitting, vomiting, defecation, flatulence, or urination. Chip interrupts the exorcism a second time. Chip is not allowed to touch the person, being that he is not actually a part of the exorcism. By doing so, he denigrates the spiritual authority of Father Calder. In the post-interview of Lara, she shows no ill effects or spiritual changes that accompany a person who has just been demonically possessed and exorcised. The possession itself changes the person forever. So here are some of the points about I Am Six that, to many people in the exorcism standards, does not make sense. And it seems as though that they created this this high fashion piece of episode or show to create hype. Another one who just wants to break through and become popular by creating an exorcism on air. Wasn't live, but on air and recorded, that does not go through any of the steps that you should do when doing an exorcism ritual. Did you know anything about this?
No, not at all. That's a lot of information.
Well, this guy Kirby, I mean, now I can say he was pretty amazing and thorough. He went to the in many of the different episodes, not just this one, I Am Six. He went into other ones where he would go back to the homeowners and talk to them, and many of them said a lot of shitty things about the show itself. That a lot of things were staged, that things that Ryan had said were wrong and were not accurate. That many things, as Kirby just mentioned here, on some of the things, that things were supposedly staged and told to the homeowners, oh, it's a reenactment, but then the film or that piece of film was then used as actual evidence of, and not a reenactment. And so the homeowners wanted to clear the air in that manner. So here we go again, where we've got a debate whether or not it is the willingness of the hosts and the crew, or is it of the producers and the channel itself?
Well, clearly all of that is all of them together. I mean, that's a lot of info.
That's just one episode.
Right, that's what I'm talking about. So that's just not Ryan doing that. That's everybody doing that.
Right. Now, you get into the fact that Ryan Buell then has personal issues. And as I mentioned before, he claimed that he had pancreatic cancer, which turned out to not be true. And this was validated by his own mother going on social media.
I know. How horrible is that, by the way?
Right.
You're outed by your own mother.
So she debunks that piece. And then he gets into a whirlwind of drugs and just craziness, and was arrested in September of 2016 for theft and stolen property and stolen service, or stolen services, I guess it's called. Let me see here. Theft of services, sorry. Do you know what this had to do with, Nina?
Isn't that when he took all money for some kind of show he was having or whatever, and then he just canceled the show and never returned anyone's money?
Yeah, and it wasn't just for one of the tours that he did, which was the what is it called? Conversations with the Dead tour. That was one of his bigger tours where he was going to have, once again, Chip Coffey, Michelle Belanger, and a whole bunch of other people. Oh, the name just came to me, Nina. The Ghost Adventures researcher that I was talking about that did the research for them was Jeff Belanger. He is the guy who was in charge of finding out the locations and then giving it to the guys. And that's what I was saying.
So he's the guy that fucked it all up.
Well, that's what I was saying. Is it he that gave them the wrong information, or was it the combination of the two that then created a new story to hype up the episode itself?
Gotcha.
But I digress. So Michelle Belanger, who is another sort of, I don't know if you call her psychic healer or something, but she was a part of the crew of the Paranormal State at the time. And so they were going to be going all around the country as well as into Canada. And he took, you know how much money he took from people?
How much was it?
$80,000.
Wow.
$80,000 he took from people and did not pay back.
That's scummy.
Did not pay back. He claimed that, and the reason why this all happened was because he would cancel the tours periodically, and then at one point basically canceled the entire tour for claims of being ill due to the pancreatic cancer. And so he kept all of the money. then proceeded to start to sell autographed books and stuff online about taking demonic possession or exorcism classes online that he would instruct, and once again would cancel all of them because he was feeling ill, and also was not sending out the books that people would buy. And so, in addition to the $80,000 that he took, it was more money that he pocketed over time. And so, shit hit the fan, and he was arrested in 2016. But then he was arrested again.
I mean, he's had several arrests.
Yeah, he had a couple of arrests, and the recent one was in April of this year. He was arrested for domestic abuse. Excuse me. He actually attacked his boyfriend in their home and bit his finger, and it was
Oh my God.
it was all on a drug induced rampage that basically led him into basically led him to be arrested, and then shortly thereafter put into rehab, which he has just recently, within the last I think week or two, left rehab now
Right, yes, you are right.
because he's doing a lot of Facebook Live, I guess vlogs, and talking about how he's in a new light, and he is off of drugs, and he is getting back into things. He's already now starting to post again, selling his autographed books. He's talking about going on Twitch and doing live episodes there, and talking about I think the exorcism classes again to take. So it seems like he's getting on that bandwagon again. I just don't know whether or not he's going to, abuse people in the manner that he did before again.
Well, never mind that. How many people can trust him now? Does he think that he's going to have the same kind of following? I don't know.
He seems to have, his diehards seem to be still following him and, wishing him well and wanting for him to get better. And
Well, wishing him well and watching him on Facebook do different things and handing over money to him.
right, I think, we'll get to that test and see whether or not he's going to be able to do it. He also claims that he's going to be coming out with a possible show. But he's been saying that for a few years now. So
Well, he's clearly a sick guy.
he is, and I feel bad for him. I think he's an asshole. I think he is scum for what he did to many people. But I think it's sad that he, went down this road and didn't get any help. We'll see if that happens again, or if he is on the up and up.
Well, time will tell with that one, I guess.
I guess, yeah. So let's get to one more, and then we're gonna talk about the newest one that just came out this week, the Low Files. But we'll get to one more before we get to that. So Nina, do you want to talk about Most Haunted? Do you know anything about
I know
it?
absolutely nothing about that show. Absolutely nothing.
Did you ever watch it?
I don't think I've ever even seen an episode, to be honest.
You may have. I think I may have forced you at one point somewhere down the line, a bunch of years back.
Is that the one that you were on?
No. This comes from the UK. This is if you probably remember, if you see the woman Yvette Fielding, she's got sort of shoulder length blonde hair, and she's got the British accent.
If you say so.
I think I've made you watch something of this a few years back. But anyway, Most Haunted, hosted by Yvette Fielding, Kieran O'Keefe, and Carl Beatty. This comes from the UK. It was on, I think it was on the Travel Channel here, I think. It started in 2002, but I don't think it came to America until a couple of years afterwards. Believe it or not, it's still on the air, but only in the UK on their channel called the Living Channel. Despite all of the allegations of fraud, it is still on the air. And there is another article that I just wanted to read that came out. I hate these pop-ups that come here. Hold on one second. Okay. This came out in 2005, and then it was updated in May of 2013, this article. And the article is a UK-based journal or newspaper called The Mirror. It's pretty popular. I'm sure you've heard of it. Um, but this article interviewed, or the paper interviewed Kieran O'Keefe, who was the show's skeptic. He was the historic person that was sort of, his feet were planted on the ground, and he was there to sort of set the record straight on things and not go off on the paranormal side of things. And obviously with things that happened on the show, sort of led him to believe that these paranormal things were real. Sort of like you, Nina. Being on this show, you're more of a skeptic. He was the same in nature, and so he left the show a few years back, and he left the show because one of the psychics that they would have on their team at every location, this guy Derek Acora, who was notorious in Europe as being the most popular, or one of the most popular psychics.
I think I read about that.
Did you?
Yeah, I think that's where they set him up, right? Like, almost the same thing like they did to Chip Coffee.
I don't know if they set him up. I don't remember ever reading anything about that. But this guy Kieran, who was a part of the show, after he left the show, again, is this a disgruntled employee, comes out to say that this guy, this psychic, Derek Acora, was fake. He was a fraud. He was given knowledge about things beforehand, that many of the things that he had done on the show were BS, and wanted to set the record straight and let everybody know this. Of course, Yvette Fielding, who's the host of the show, the main host of the show, flat out denied any of this, but Derek Acora was taken off the show not soon after this article came out, and was interviewed a couple of times afterwards, and sort of was put on the spot, and he couldn't dig himself out of the hole that he created. But he also states, Kieran O'Keefe also states that the show itself is sort of staged. There are many things that he says happened during his time there that were staged and were put forth, not so much by the cast, but interactions between the cast and the crew that were working there. One of the things that he claimed, I'm not actually going to read the article because I remember when I read it. One of the things that he claimed was that a cast member who was, a part of, or one of the hosts, or part of the team, pushed one of the crew members in the dark, and both that cast member and the crew member reacted towards that, and confronted Yvette, and Yvette Fielding had said, "What happened? What did you feel?" And the crew member said, "Somebody pushed me." And then the cast member, or part of the team, had said, "I felt that too." But it is clearly shown on video that you can see the cast member pushing the crew member. So it was trying to elicit sort of on-the-spot reaction, and the hope was that they weren't able to catch it or see it, on camera, but it actually did. It actually did show up. So Kieran O'Keefe came forward and in this article basically talks about how Most Haunted was bullshit. One of the things, if you remember this, Nina, I talked about this many, many times. The one thing about Most Haunted revolved around pebbles or rocks always being thrown. Always. Always at the host. Do you remember ever me talking about that?
Yeah, I do remember you saying something about that now that you say it.
It was always, almost every episode, a rock or a pebble was thrown. All the time. And I don't know about you, but after watching Paranormal State, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, Kids, any of the other ones, Ghost Asylum, any of the other shows that are out there, I don't think not once have I ever seen a rock or a pebble being thrown. But yet, Yvette Fielding constantly gets rocks thrown at her in all these locations.
Gotta call bullshit on that too.
Yeah, it's funny how this show Most Haunted is still on the air and it's still showing after all of the people out there who have claimed that this was a bullshit show.
I guess the English are more forgiving than we are.
I guess, but you know what's funny? Because of all the controversy, it was pulled off of American television, and it went back to the UK. And for a time, I believe you can only catch it online, and then online it was pulled off, I believe. And so now it's only on this channel called the Living Channel that I believe is still on the air. Kieran is no longer there. I believe Carl is still with Yvette and a couple of other people, but it's the same shenanigans over and over again. And they just recently came forward in the news about claims that they actually caught a ghost on camera. And many people are calling BS about that whole thing as well. Again, are they trying to put forward some sort of dramatic piece to come back into the light so that they can get more attention? I don't know. I guess you can't comment on the show if you haven't seen it, Nina.
Yeah, really. I'm so. I mean, I could call bullshit bullshit, but I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
Well, I can tell, before we get onto the low files, I can add one more piece of information. The show that I was on, which is called Ghost Encounters Face to Face. It was on the Biography channel a few years back. I can tell you from my experience that when they interviewed me for my portion of this episode, and it was about Eastern State Penitentiary. And on this show, what they did was interview real people and got their experiences and first encounters with spirits or with incidences that happened at whatever location they were at. And then this crew, with the host, would actually investigate the place and see if the claims from the people that they interviewed would happen on air or on their show, and they would capture it and have evidence for. I remember and so I was not a part of the investigation. I was only there to be interviewed about my experience. And I remember while I was talking about my experience with, I guess he's the producer. I'm not even sure who he was. But as they were interviewing me and asking me the questions, they would stop after I would respond and coach me in how to answer the question. Not lie, but sort of direct me on how much information I should have in a sentence, or during that period of time that they were filming me while they asked that question. And then also too, I had told them legitimately who I was when I got there. They knew that I was a participant on an investigation at a conference during my experience that happened at Eastern State Penitentiary. But when they labeled me for the show, they put guest of Eastern State Penitentiary. They didn't say who I was. And so they're not necessarily lying, but they didn't necessarily say the real truth of who I was. I think if they put that I was a paranormal investigator, it's not believable or wouldn't come over as real to people. They would say, oh, he's a paranormal investigator. Of course that's going to happen to him if he goes to a place. So that was my experience. Is that bullshit? Is that coercion on the part of the show? Could be. I could say that for the little... They never took my words out of context, and they didn't change anything of my story. So I'm grateful for that. But I think... just even how they labeled me under my name when they were introducing me on the show was not truthful, but I don't know if that makes a case or not. Okay. Let's get to low files. How low has paranormal shows gone now with this one?
Tell me what you really think.
Well, I posted on our page, on the Conscious Mind Facebook page, an excerpt that I found and I put together and clipped up and shortened and condensed this video clip because I had to show it. When Rob Lowe was on the couch and they were talking about the equipment that they were going to be using, and it was so effing confusing that I heard the son say, "Oh, cool, a spirit box," and then all of a sudden they started to talk about the Ovilus, and you see Rob Lowe taking the spirit box from his son's hand and saying, "Now this is an Ovilus, and this takes the energies from the air, and you can only get it in this frequency." And he was talking about the spirit box because that's the description of a spirit box. But you hear Rob's voice say, "That's the Ovilus," but you don't see his face in that scene. You just see his hand grabbing the box. So this obviously was a miscalculation from the director, and when they did an edit job on this whole thing, but it was laughable. And if a director and a producer are creating a paranormal show, they should have some knowledge about the equipment and understand this. That was the quickest thing that popped into my head when I first saw this. After that, they lost me. Then when I saw the shaman, quote unquote, the shaman that was on that show, it was really ridiculous. And there's one point, and I mentioned it in our Facebook post, where he was just joking around. I mean, literally, they spent about a minute and a half on this section of the show where he was joking around and threw a ball down the stairs to frighten Rob Lowe and his son while they were there. It's just ridiculous. It was out of fun. It is meant to be, has nothing to do with entertainment. He could be in a circus doing the same thing. There's no need for him to be in the paranormal. I understand that he loves the field, but if you love the field, you wouldn't treat it this way. That's just my opinion. What's yours, Nina?
I think the show, and I swear, don't shoot me, but I think the show for him is just about him traveling with his kids and getting an experience with his boys. I don't think the show is really meant to be taken so like it's going to be a real ghost hunting show. That's not the feel I got from it, and I think it was just him creating something with his boys that he always wanted to do. And yeah, he said that he likes watching all these shows and these ghost hunting shows and blah blah. And do I believe he should have knowledge of the equipment that he's using? Yes, I do. But I don't think it's meant to be like a Ghost Hunters or a Ghost Adventurer type show. I just think it's meant to be I'm traveling with my boys and I'm having fun and look at what we're doing type show. I thought some of I laughed through a lot of it, I gotta say. I thought it was pretty funny.
Meaning that it was entertaining for you, or that it was
Correct.
Stupid?
Well, some of it was stupid, clearly, but I mean, I laughed at it. When the shaman, I don't understand that whole thing either. First of all, are you not supposed to cleanse an area when you're going to a haunted location, or am I wrong about that?
Well, technically you should cleanse it, because the idea is that you if you have enough passion that you don't want any spirits lingering around. You want them to, because this is sort of what people say is torture for the spirits being here. They haven't crossed over, so you should be cleansing. But I don't know. And to be fair, this show is not meant to. I mean, the show is not only investigating, paranormal investigating, meaning ghost hunting. It is everything. Like, there's episodes on Bigfoot. There's going to be episodes
Area 51, everything. Yes. Uh-huh.
Right. So it's not just another paranormal show like the others. Although this is sort of like Fact or Faked, or the other one with Josh. I can't remember the name of it right now. But it sort of encompasses, all of the paranormal, and these are his adventures with his sons. I get that. I get that this is entertaining and fun, but I don't know. I guess you have to understand it from my point of view. There's little to no validity in what we talk about, or what I talk about, and what I do. There's no validity in it because of the nonsense and the BS and the comical shows and articles and websites that are out there that sort of denigrate the field itself. And I think just adding this one more piece where it is just creating a mockery of it all, as he's on the phone with his wife talking about how she's, upset at the fact that, the shaman needs to cleanse them and make them safe before they walk in. And he's sort of laughing it off like it's bullshit. Um, you walk into a haunted location, you can get something attached to you. You can bring something home. Your kids could be, harmed or whatever. And they're sort of
And
laughing it off.
I'm sure he realizes that, but at what point do you have to say to yourself, I can't think like that because it'll happen to me? Maybe that's what he was going through.
That's fine to be that way, but he didn't portray that. He portrayed it as, oh, she's crazy, and actually, you see him. He puts his fingers to his temple like he was
Yeah,
going to
you're right.
shoot himself.
He
Like
did do that. You're
like
right.
she's crazy, she's nuts or whatever.
Well, maybe because she was saying it over and over and over and over again. She was being over dramatic in his eyes.
Could be, but what the show then portrays is people with that mentality of trying to, be safe are idiots. And if you're an idiot, that would mean that you don't have faith in, or you don't believe that anything negative or bad like that can happen. And it quickly, honestly, then it quickly changed once they were in the home and investigating. It got to be a little more serious. And yes, of course, there were laughable points throughout the whole thing because all they kept saying was, "Oh my God, what's that? Oh my God, did you hear that? Oh my God, what was that? Oh,
Well,
what's
it's
over
funny
there?"
because one of his sons is like completely like, this is BS crap. This is not going to happen. I think at one point he said, what makes you think that us are going to find something and get it on camera when all these other people that are doing it like for real don't have it on camera? Like, what makes you think that we're going to be the people that catch that? Like he's going in thinking this is total BS. Even when he was walking through the what was that thing? The wherever the hell they were, that castle thing. Um,
Preston Castle.
yes, even though when they're walking through there, he was saying, "I don't believe that. That's BS. You're writing your own narrative. Now you're saying this, that, and the other." He was trying to debunk it from jump, and then at first light that he saw, he was like, "Oh my God, this is unbelievable!" Like you don't believe it until you see it for yourself. So I sort of was reliving my whole way of thinking through. I think his name was John.
Hmm.
The way he went in and saw everything. So I was like, that was me. I didn't believe it either until something happened to me. So I mean, I don't believe everything, but I believe what happened to me was real, and now you're feeling it for yourself. It's like a different thing.
Well, to me, the younger, I believe he was the younger son, who you were just talking about. He is the skeptic or whatever. I think I think he's riding the roller coaster on this whole thing. I think he's easily swayed either way because there was one point where they were walking down in the hallway. I think it was going to the mess hall when Rob Lowe had the Ovilus in his hand and it was saying pie and it was saying something else. I forgot, lady or something like that. And the son, I guess his name is John. I don't remember his name. The younger one was saying, "Oh, Dad, I think this was at the point when you were just saying that he was writing his own narrative, or maybe he said something different."
Because the Ovilus said beat, and they said, "Oh, we're standing right by the room where that woman died. She was beaten up," and he's like,
No,
"No,
they were
she
hung.
was choked.
Yeah, she was
She
hung.
was choked or whatever." And now you're writing your own narrative. So that was him trying to be like, "This is so not real."
But 5 minutes later, he's in the room where the woman died, or where her
And
body was put.
and
And
it said her name.
no. He was amazed at the lights being lit up from that, I don't know, TriCaster thing or whatever it was.
Right, right. When
And
they said just make it red or whatever too, and then it just stayed red.
right. So to me, it's like, I mean, it's interesting to see this happening and unfolding, but he was more of a believer when lights were flashing, but not a
Well,
believer when the Ovilus was saying words that sort of related to the
I
place.
think I think at that point when he was listening to the words, at first when they said pie and they're like, "Oh, right by the kitchen," he was like, "Oh, that's such crap." I don't. I would have said the same thing. I would have been like, "Don't believe it. Let's just keep moving." And then when it said lady, I'm like, "All right, maybe I can believe it a little bit. Maybe not." Then it said beat. Yeah, that's bullshit or whatever. And then I think after that is when he started to peek over the hill, because I think at that point when the the box had said her last name, I think, and then something else. I think you see a change in him, because then that's when the whole light thing started to happen, and he was like, "This has got to be for real. This is. It's just something that you can't explain at that point." And I think that's when it overcame him, that he was like, "This has got to be something here is not right. Something here is, uh, uh, not human or supernatural or whatever you want to call it."
Hmm.
So I think that's when he peaked and he was like, "You know what? This has got to be something going on here. This is unbelievable." And that would have been me too if I would have asked that. Can you change? Don't keep it one color or change it just to one color. And that happened in front of me. It would have blew my mind. I would have been totally. My mind would have been blown. And it just shakes you out of what you thought was BS, and you're like, God, could something really be here? And I get that feeling. So
I just think that uh, you know, here's my ideal, and I've said this 100 times before. My ideal show to see on television, first off, needs to be live. It has to be live. I know it's not the most entertaining to watch a live investigation, but I think it's more real to watch a live investigation happening. But also, number two, um, you don't need a personality. You don't need someone with a person. It shouldn't be someone with a personality. I
what do
understand
you
the whole
what
like.
what do you
What
mean personality?
you don't need someone who's a character to
Okay,
lead the pack. I understand, regular sitcoms on a show, there's a protagonist and an antagonist. It happens in books and everywhere else. There has to be somebody who is the main of whatever it is.
right.
I don't feel that you need to, in this genre. I don't think you need to have a main. It would actually be interesting to see every week a new person or a new group of people um, investigating the paranormal and sort of understanding how people react and the differences that things may happen with different people, because then the focus becomes what the intent is supposed to be, which is to find evidence or present evidence or to show experiences. That is what should be highlighted, and not the Zacks, not the Rob Lowe's, not the Jason Hawes, not those people. It should be the content, the intent of whatever the show is supposed to be, which is paranormal, which is finding out about the paranormal. That's my ideal show. I think live content is interesting because it engages the audience and it makes them become a part of the show and a part of the investigation, because they can say that they were sitting there watching this and it unfolded in front of them if an incident happens. Not then to then have a dubbed and copied and pasted pre-recorded episode where people are going to have complete doubt, because you're never going to show the reality of it all if you create a pre-recorded show. It's never going to pull the true believers onto your side. Live shows, I think, will do that, in my opinion.
I totally agree with that. But live shows are a liability, I'm sure, to TV networks because anything can happen live and anything can ruin you being live.
But that's reality. And that's what
I,
reality television should be.
I get it, but we all know everything is scripted. Let's just,
It,
call it what it is.
it is. I work for an entertainment company, and I know the ins and outs of a lot of the shows. And a lot of them, supposed reality, are scripted. Things are planned out. Things are, scenarios are created. There is a sense of real to it, but the surroundings are manufactured in order to induce the reaction that you want or that the producers want for the show.
Right.
I don't know. So, what are your final thoughts on this whole thing? This whole topic of paranormal reality television and fake?
I mean, you got to take everything with a grain of salt, and you just, I mean, it's hard to believe that things are really happening or really true, unfortunately. And reality TV is really not reality. And just be aware and try. And I mean, like I said, you got to take things with a grain of salt. And if you enjoy the shows, enjoy them. And if you see something you don't believe, then you don't believe it. It is what it is. But there's nothing we can do, any of us, to change any of that. So you got to run with it, unfortunately.
Well, I think with everything, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And I think trust your intuition on what you believe and research. I can't stress that enough. Look things up. If you don't agree with things, research it online. If you don't believe the history of whatever show is being portrayed, look it up online. Call the town itself. I've done that a few times actually, to find out the truth on things, and look for it yourself. Don't be spoon fed everything and then believe it. That goes with this show that we do here. Don't take what we say to be truth and gospel. Find your own truth. Find your own reality in what you're searching for, because it ultimately is up to you to create what your reality will be. I can't do that for you, and Nina can't do that for you. That's ultimately up to you. And so I just say, have a filter when watching these shows, obviously, and understand that, probably 50% of what you see and hear is not real or scripted or manufactured in some way. And so understand that portion of it and don't make assumptions based on the totality of it all. So with that, Nina, I'm going to end the show. Whether you believe that the paranormal shows are real or just faked for entertainment, there are people out there, and this I want to stress tremendously. There are people out there who are not in the limelight or in front of those big studio cameras professing and calling out to the spirits for the almighty dollar. They are in it for the truth and for the answers we all seek. Those are the real pioneers. Those are the real para-celebrities that we should honor and praise. Thank you for joining us tonight, and hope you enjoyed the content that we talked about. We may not be experts, and I stress that tremendously. We are not experts in the field, but we like to connect with others like you, others who want to learn more. Come back next Saturday night for more interesting paranormal topics and discussions. Until then, my friends, have a paranormal week. Good night.